Hey everyone, welcome to the Story Studio podcast. Today we have on our show, where else would they be? Our good and regular friend Andre Chaperon and his partner Shawn. Shawn, I don't actually know your last name.
Twing, Twing.
All right, and you guys are writing together, but you're also business partners. And why don't I just let you guys do it? So basically, let me do a quick intro for Andre as far as we know him, and then I'll give it to you guys to like flesh it out and say, well, you did a terrible job with that. Actually, I was telling this story to my family yesterday. I said, hey, we're going to be talking to Andre tomorrow, and my kids didn't know who that was, and so I explained, and I said, Shawn and I actually met for the first time in person and started discussing autoresponder madness, which was, Andre's flagship course. And it was funny because I said that if Shawn and I had a song, and this would be Shawn Platt in the upper left, that it would be under autoresponder madness. And then we had a total geek out moment when we were actually together in person, and somebody called and said, hey, I'm here with Andre Chaperon and he wants to meet you. And we were like, oh my God. So we have a really good history. We really respect Andre and his way of doing business, email marketing with manners and with storytelling, which is a big deal and not how it's normally done. And he spoke at our first event, and just a great guy. And so we wanted to do another state of the industry and sort of approach it from the marketing angle as opposed to like the book angle, which the rest of our guests have been. So welcome to the show, guys. And if you could then tell us the stuff that I missed.
Yeah, it's good to be here. I can't believe I actually spoke at your event. I don't speak at anything. So when I mentioned it to the other Shawn, he found it hard to believe.
Still do. Well, I remember that I had asked you, and you said, no, I mean, you're like the best, most polite Andre rejection email, like just full of manners. And I would love to, but I get horrible stage fright. And you told me a couple stories about like times it didn't go well. And I don't know. I think there was just so much curiosity maybe that we had for one another and our mutual businesses, because when I first came across Andre, I want to say actually it was Danny, who still works with us, who introduced him. He's our optimization guy, and it might have been because he's always had his radar out for like really interesting marketers, and it might have been that he sent a forward or something, and I'm like, this guy is awesome. Like, this guy is really, really awesome. And the more I read Andre's emails, the more I really liked him. And he was the first person who I ever met online where like I was a fan of their work and then I met them. And so when we were the very, very, very first iteration of Stone Table, where it was like, hey, let's get a mastermind together and, get
this would be Stone Table the mastermind, not Stone Table the other thing, if you're getting confused.
Yeah, right. This is like,
it's all irrelevant now, so just you can
6 years ago, maybe a long time ago. And Andre is not in the book space at all, so like that mastermind really didn't make a lot of sense for him. But I think that he has his I'm gonna write a thriller someday. That's there. But also just the idea of, wow, they're doing interesting things and they're using email for publishing. I think there was enough curiosity there more than anything. And I think just over those conversations, it became, you know what, I will do that. And what I loved was that I didn't badger Andre into it. Although I have been known for badgering people into shit. This was not that case at all. He sent another email and he said, I'm going to be in town at this time and it overlaps. And can you tell me more about what it will be? And I said, well, we don't have a stage. It's not a hotel thing. We're just going to have some bar stools and we'll be up there with you and it'll just be a conversation. And I think that because it was a conversation and not really a speech, that made it really palatable.
Yeah, so I think, well, I'm obviously known for the email marketing thing, but everything's underneath our one brand now. So email is just a component of one of the things we do. I think Shawn may have come into my world through the email course. It was either that or Sphere of Influence. I forget now. It was one of the two, and that's how he came into my world, and I'll be forever grateful for that. yeah, and then we hooked up. We became business partners earlier this year, but we've been collaborating for the best part of a year, I think. And yeah, so that's it. Email's one thing. Shawn's historically a traffic guy, but he can say more about that.
I ran an agency, still sort of winding down an agency for 21 years. So I've stumbled on Andre. I don't know when. I mean, just sort of was aware of him for a long time. He's one of the OGs of internet marketing, and I've seen them all. So back when he had hair, I don't even think you had hair then. Sorry, Andre. I'm still trying to get used to thinking about you on stage, and it's throwing me off a little bit. Yeah, and it just, I mean, ultimately, we're just two guys who like to write together. Everything else are kind of distant details, and we both have backgrounds in marketing, but it's really just two people who love the written word and love the thinking that goes along with it, and the collaboration really is built on that. We have certain skill sets. We have really, it's more about an alignment of values. I mean, it's kind of freaky that we're very different in many ways. Like, Andre tends to think things through. I tend to jump out of airplanes and try to figure out how to make parachutes before I hit the ground. I'm more of a like, hold my beer, I want to try something kind of person. But when it comes time to actually doing the work, like, it's effortless. Andre has a voice, I have a voice. Together we have a voice that's neither of our voices. I'm much more of like an A to B writer. Like, here's the controlling idea, I'm going to get you there as quickly as I can. And Andre has much more texture to his writing, and something comes out that's neither one of us, which I could do that forever.
Yeah, we uniquely understand that. that is how we create our work here across the board. So that's really cool. How did you initially get into email marketing? Like, why was that an early focus? Because I know that there's so many ways to kind of build funnels and make money online. And Andre, with autoresponder madness way back in the day, you were very much focused on email, but specifically quality communication, like making your emails valuable.
Storytelling with, rather than the mass approach, which is like, I have 50 million people on my list and maybe 5 of them will buy my expensive product, that sort of thing, like the small lists, it's just like ultimate permission marketing, open loops, like storytelling. So I would say, I would add an extra part to what Shawn said. How did you get into it? But then how did you get into it the way you did, which I'm imagining in the early days of like the Frank Kerns of the world was bucking some trends.
Yeah, I mean, email is the perfect delivery vehicle for an introvert. So that was just the most natural way for me to, because I was trying all sorts of things early on, and you obviously need to communicate with an audience. And I wasn't about to do video like we're doing now, and I wasn't about to do audio like we do now. It was all just written stuff. And some of your viewers might know that I'm a dyslexic, so writing certainly wasn't the thing I should be doing. But I just loved it. It felt right, like one of those gut feelings that you can't quite explain. So I just went with it, and I think that's how everything happened. And then the other trait, I guess, I have is, if everybody's going left, I have to go right. We operate in a weird marketplace, internet marketing, that is anyway, that everybody's looking for hacks and tricks and shortcuts, and they're all going mass. And so it was the obvious thing for me to do, was just go the other way and figure it out. And yeah, small seemed good, and people were responding, and I think that's just evolved from that.
So originally, was the first time you went about this, was it more of an experiment? Hey, if everybody's doing it this way, if they need $250,000 or 250,000 people on a list to get the conversions they need to make this work, I could do it with a few hundred if I do it this way? Or were you naturally more of that kind of communicator, so that's just where you started?
I wish I was journaling back then, but I wasn't. So it's difficult to think back 17 years. But one thing was for sure, that it just didn't feel right to me that you needed to have thousands of people, like just your focus being on mass, just to get as many people onto an email list as humanly possible. All the mechanisms that come before somebody gets onto your list, you want to make those barriers so low that there's zero friction. You just want to get them on. You can say anything, do anything, just get them on the list, and then once they're on the list, you can sell them. And that's pretty much the mentality. And I think it's still largely like that. So that just didn't. It was a gut feeling, I guess, is the answer that I keep coming back to.
I'll add some texture to that, though, because Andre he's that's the David Foster Wallace thing. The fish isn't aware of the water. I think. I suspect that Andre got there because he has more integrity than the next 100 people in the industry combined, and I think it was like the only way right he could do it, right? And he's just not. I mean, that's who he is, so he's not aware of it. And I think that probably was the forcing function. It was like you just can't do it the other way if you're led with integrity. And that was probably the strangest, scariest part of the relationship years ago when we first got to know each other. Is I've met pretty much everybody in the business and worked with many of them, and most of the time the public persona and the behind the scenes persona is not the same, and it sucks when that happens. When you kind of have a vibe, like I kind of like this person, whoever it is, and it's cool. You do you, I'll do me. But the thing that there's always a point when you're making the transition to okay, now I'm going to really kind of see behind the scenes. There's this point when you're like, this is about to be disappointing. And the thing that was really cool when that happened with Andre, when we got to be friends, I was like, oh no shit, this guy is exactly the same behind the scenes as he is, in all of his public events, which I'm now just becoming aware of all of his stage time. And I suspect that was really what drove that decision making. Like, sure, Zag instead of Zig, but it was more, I don't think he could do it any other way if we had to. Like, I don't think we could write a promotion that would compete with like the big Schwarmy promote. Like, I don't think we could do it. I just don't think.
Oh, that sounds familiar too.
Yeah, it's hard.
We've tried to sell out too, and it is impossible.
Many times we've really banged against that. Like, okay, we'll find a way to sell out, but no.
But we actually don't know how to do it. We're totally incapable. I remember the first time I bought Autoresponder Madness, and I tried to share it with Dave, who isn't here right now, but only because he's sleeping. So I was telling him, no, dude, I swear it's good. I really want you to read this and internalize it. He's like, how much did you pay for it? I don't know, $97. It's trash. It's garbage. He would not believe for anything that this Andre Chaperon guy, like he even used air quotes when saying his name, was like anything possibly legit. He expected, like, he was probably scouring Salty Droid for mentions of your name.
Yeah, this is one thing that Dave and I have, that Andre and I have in common is the first time we met Dave, we didn't know it, but we were on trial. Like, only in retrospect do I look back and say, oh man, I could have been skewered somehow.
Yeah, so my point is that Dave loves Andre and thinks the world of Andre. And anyone who's been listening to the show for any amount of time knows that seal of approval is pretty significant.
All right, well, we could keep talking about how everybody loves Andre, but I think we've also been talking a lot about the ways that you did things differently without explaining actually what that means. So a lot of people out there maybe don't know what sort of traditional email marketing was at the time, what it looked like, what the practices were, and how what you guys do is different from that and how it bucked the trend. So can we attack that a little bit? Like, what was the standard? What is the standard? And how is your approach different?
It's interesting speaking to you guys because your audience are writers and you guys are writers, and it's unique because the one thing that people that are getting into email marketing battle with the most is writing. In fact, that was one of the insights when I was at your event. That still, writers, they can write their books, but they scared to write emails. It seems weird to them to promote a book that sells for $4 on Amazon, which it's weird. We all have these little barriers that we've got to get over. But in terms of the dynamics of creating a narrative over multiple emails, I mean, it's your audience should totally click and just get this. But so that's in a nutshell is whenever we write anything, promote anything, everything is always it's in narrative form, but essentially the marketing message that we want to get out is through narrative, and all the value that we dispense, the promotions, everything is wrapped in this wrapper. That's how can this be valuable to somebody else, and how can it be interesting to, how can we present it in such a way that it's going to be interesting to somebody else, where they're going to want to receive this email. And beyond just whatever's being promoted, there is a huge amount of value in just receiving these emails. That's even part of an actual promotion, which it seems weird that people would want to receive emails knowing that they're going to be sold for a product, but they'll email and say, yeah, I'm missing that second email you sent yesterday, because emails, some of them say part 1 of 3, part 2 of 3. So when they miss one, right? So yeah, I mean, we can unpack the framework that I use if you want.
Yeah, let's, because I'm reminded of Shawn with the W a second ago saying that the fish doesn't recognize the water, because what I think is happening here, Andre, is it's almost as if you don't realize how special your emails are, because you're just like talking about, well, why would you write with integrity, right? With value. Especially back in the day, this has waned a little bit, but when email marketing was really new, there were some kind of like really, I don't know, like offensive in a ways that emails was done with, like the yellow highlighter, super long. Well, I guess that was more on the web, but they were aggressive, and even the terminology around it was aggressive. There are things like, I don't know if this was like an original thing or if this came later, but things like there were tripwires.
Oh,
like
the tripwire?
Right. Like, why are you talking in terms of tripwires? Like, why? Right. Exactly. Why is that something that you're thinking of, like getting people in and tripping them so that they can?
So your first engagement with a possible customer, you blow them up?
Well, the other thing to remember too is that, like, it's really about what you're playing on. Traditional, well, not traditional, but the online email marketing as it started out was very much about emotional manipulation. It still is. Now they kind of like put a veneer of authenticity on top of emotional manipulation and use the word, like things that sound like you're authentic, but it still is about changing someone to take the action that you want them to take based on, getting them to feel something that you want them to feel. Not like authors don't do that, but the difference is, are we going to, build them up? Are we going to help this person feel good about themselves and feel like they can go and do something? Or are we going to make them feel like they're just totally lost and alone unless they buy my thing? And so I think what you said, Andre, in terms of, having the narrative wrapping around it, but also having value. And those two pieces, I think, are what makes the big difference between you and a traditional email marketer, where it's all about, like, how can I get someone to say yes? Instead, you're saying, how can I show someone why they might want to decide to say yes, but you're not necessarily trying to.
It's relationship marketing too. So in a lot of the churn and burn lists, the whole point is it's all launch focused, or it's sales focused, or it's how do we squeeze the most profit out of this list. And a quality list isn't run like that. It's, I have this list of people who are paying attention to me. How can I nurture that relationship and keep it over time? You don't want people to unsubscribe because you're always trying to sell them shit, or you're, giving them artificial value because, oh, I need a reason to send this email. Give me a link to something valuable, quick, stat.
Oh man, bunch of email marketers talking about email marketing. I want specifics. So just remember, like, I actually want Neve to do this. So Neve, can you describe, because you're a marketer's marketer too, but like, a good one. So can you tell us, give us the landscape.
You mean good in quality or morality?
I think he means in non-evil.
give us the evil. Like, give us what email marketing looks like outside of the Andre, motif, especially back in the day, and then what specifically Andre is doing.
Well, I think,
and Shawn.
It really is all about intention. But in terms of what it looked like, I think most people understand what clickbait is. And it's the same kind of thing. It's email really used to be about making someone decide that they were going to go and buy something from you. So there would be a lot of emotionally manipulative language. There would be lots of not really saying anything, but sort of making people feel things like fear of missing out, feel things like, you know, that there's this one hack, there's this one weird trick, you know, number 3 is going to, you know, shock you, things like that, you know, where you're really playing on someone's curiosity and you're playing on some of their fears, you know. So actually, this is a huge part of how advertising has gone wrong, but but like way back in the day, what was it? It was Listerine, I think, was originally developed to sterilize wounds. And then they were like, oh, hey, we can actually kill bacteria in the mouth as well. And that can help to reduce halitosis. And so the original marketing campaigns that when Listerine was changing to sort of billing themselves as a mouthwash, was just all about this woman called Sad Edna who didn't know that she had halitosis. So she didn't know this is why she was lonely and no one was marrying her. And so there were all these things about poor Sad
Spinster.
Edna. Yeah, who's all alone because she doesn't know she has halitosis, and now if only she bought Listerine, then her
Does
whole
anybody
life.
want to write a book called Sad Edna with me?
but I think it's a really good illustration of, are you trying to make someone feel like they're hopeless and you have a miracle cure? Whereas what the difference is with what Andre's doing, and I've been on your list for years, Andre, so I've seen a lot of it, but is really to create a real genuine human connection, and you treat the other person with respect. So instead of, you know, the emotionally manipulative language and the NLP stuff and all of those clickbaity types of things, you're not playing on fear of missing out. You're very much playing to someone's intellect as well as curiosity, but the curiosity is very much like, hey, look at things from this perspective. Isn't this interesting? So you'll find that even though it would seem like you can make a lot more money, and you can if you drive on really big numbers of traffic, you can make a ton of money through just pure manipulation. But you're playing sort of the longer game with what you're doing in terms of building trust and people who know you, who respect you, who like you, and then they become lifelong customers instead of that flash in the pan, like, oh, I bought something because I was afraid I'd miss it. So I think that's the biggest.
And a little clarification on manipulation too, because manipulation is not just okay, it's necessary. And we're storytellers. Like every single book we write, every single chapter we write is an argument in manipulation. Like that's what it is. We're making a case so the reader believes our bullshit, right? So an email, like you're a storyteller, like be okay with that, but always use integrity. So here's a specific example of like a subject line that could go very wrong, and I've seen go very wrong, but also can be very right. So back before I was writing fiction, when I was doing copywriting and a lot of just ghostwriting marketing work, I was in a lot of different industries. And there was one subject line that I used across all these different areas. And it didn't matter where I used it, it always crushed it. And the subject line was, "You are not alone." And because that taps into like this super just primal fear, that like even people who want to be alone, like Dave, don't actually want to be lonely, right? So that is a distinction. And I really loved using that headline, but you can only use it once. You can't use that headline on like every Friday if you send that out, unless you're on the "You Are Not Alone" newsletter, then it's okay. But as a regular subject line, it absolutely is not. And when I would use it, it would be, okay, I know I'm going to get a lot of attention because the open rates on that were always super, super sky high. So I have their attention. What am I really trying to say right now? And because you know you have kind of a captive audience for that email, they are interested in hearing what you have to say, your messaging really better deliver on that promise. And the hilarious thing about this is I took that subject line very seriously. I knew it was like the secret weapon I could always pull out. And I wrote an article for Copyblogger about this subjort line. And I don't know, a week later.
Wow, you never learn, do you?
Everywhere.
Yeah, right. It was just everywhere. The subject line.
Should we write in sequel in series or? Damn it!
Right.
How many words are in a serial?
what was hilarious is I ended up being at a mastermind. This is just 2 years ago. And the person on stage was talking about how we're never alone and referred to this article. And I was like, I've got to say it. And I just said, that was me. I wrote that. And it was pretty cool. So it is a universal idea, but you have to have manners when you get the attention.
Well, here's one thing though. Our audience are all authors, and they tend to have, they're very different from your typical online marketing, online entrepreneur type audience. They don't want hacks. They don't want to market. They're sort of allergic to marketing because they're so afraid of being in any way manipulative.
Or having their audience think that they're insincere.
Right. So I think that actually it would be really helpful, Andre, to hear a bit of your framework, because I think our audience really does want to know, how can I have manners and still, use my email in a constructive way to bring more sales into my author business.
Let me throw a thought out there on that to get started, get Andre started, but there's an orientation change that's necessary, right? So when people think about writing emails or email marketing, telling stories, doesn't matter how you do it, there's an orientation that it's deliberate. You're trying to accomplish something, and persuasion, it becomes deliberate. And persuasion or the desire to buy or any of those things, they're not deliberate, they're emergent. They come from a good story. They come from actually caring about what you're writing about. Michael Pollan talked about this in an interview with, I think it was with Tim Ferriss, where he said that he doesn't want to be the guy on the stage saying, this is what you need to do, I'm the expert. He likes to go on journeys and then takes his reader on the journey that he went on. And that subtle orientation shift in an email changes everything. If you come in mind saying, I want someone to take this action at the end of this email, and how do I deliberately construct that? You will get it wrong every single time. The reader will feel it. But if you say, there's just this idea that's interesting to me, and I want to describe it to you and sort of take you on that journey, and from that, persuasion will emerge. The right people will be drawn to that. And if you don't make that shift in orientation, you will bang your head against the writing wall every single time, because it's too hard. We don't want to manipulate other people. We want to tell good stories from which desire builds. And if we get the order wrong, and most email marketing gets the order wrong, they try to make it deliberate when in fact it is always emergent.
Yeah, one of the big ideas that or concepts or theories, I guess, that we built everything around now, and this has come since writing the first versions of Or Is What a Madness, is this idea of systems thinking. But I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole right now, unless you guys want to touch on it, because it can get confusing. But the point is that email is a system within a system, and that biggest system is your business. So it's everything you do in the business, the books you write, the audience you have, the readers you have on Amazon or wherever, and that's an entire thing. And the business as a whole has a certain thing that you're optimizing for. And for Shawn and I, as a business, we optimize for happy customers. So happy customers is that functional goal of the entire system that we're building. And email is just a subsystem of that. So understanding that we're optimizing for happy customers, we can't do anything in our little email marketing system that's going to violate that ultimate goal, if that makes sense. So the main, there's 4 core components of Or Is What a Madness currently. So there's 2 legs. There's the relationship engine, which is made up of 2 pieces, and then there's the revenue engine, which is how you make money. It's the things you can do once you've established this relationship. So the first 2 parts is the soap opera sequence, which you guys know about that, and then newsletters. Soap opera sequences are these automated sequences of emails that go out when somebody adds themselves to your email list. And then newsletters are newsletters. You send out your newsletter whenever you send out your newsletter, but it's normally something you write one-off and you send it out. But the big idea is those 2 components are a mechanism to foster relationships and build relationships. It's not a place to sell somebody brand new that is just coming into your world. And I think that's the first insight, that most people think the autoresponder sequence is, there's a new prospect that's just landed on their email list. They've got something to sell ultimately. So how can we move them from there to there as quickly as possible? So they're optimizing that part of their system to generate a sale, which can be in violation of the ultimate big thing, which is to create a happy customer. So for us, those first components of Autoresponder Madness is just to establish that relationship. So everything we do, everything we say is to help somebody with a certain issue. Obviously, you guys are writers, and people aren't coming here because they have a marketing problem. So it's unique in that sense that you're not helping people solve problems. You guys are entertainers, right? But the point is still, you want to establish this relationship with this person. And once that relationship has been established, well, you can sell products to friends, right? You can tell a friend about this book that you've really enjoyed, whether you've written it or somebody else has written it, and it's not going to feel weird, right? So that's the whole idea, is to do the relationship part first, and then once that's been established, then the next two components are components that allow you to either sell automatically or have a sell when there's a launch, when there's an opening and closing. So there's a hard open and hard close, but we only do it once we've done that first piece.
So taking a step, I'm
sorry, just definitions. I'm on definition patrol. So when you say soap opera sequence, why is it called a soap opera sequence? Can you describe that? I just want people to really know what we're talking about here.
So, soap operas, they're episodic. They just carry on going, right? They have no real ending. So when I first came up with the name, that was the whole idea, is this email sequence that doesn't really have an end. It does now, because you can't just keep extending it.
But it's like a canceled soap.
Yeah, I've written one that's a year long, but then you just need to change it. But it's weird. But anyway, so that's where the name comes from. So it's just a whole bunch of emails strung together to create a narrative arc across, let's say, 10 emails or 7 emails for a week.
And you're writing that creatively, like a story with open loops, right?
Yes. So yeah, so one of the things that Shawn and I do, I mean, most people don't do this, and this is how our version of email, I think, changes, or how we see email is different. Is we have conversations with people using email, and we enjoy unpacking ideas using email. So we're having these long form conversations using email, as opposed to email just being this little snapshot, this little snack that then gets them to a website, and the website's supposed to do stuff. But email is just more personal. So we just have fun writing emails and just unpacking ideas. And if we find those ideas interesting to ourselves, seeing we writing them, we know that it's going to be interesting to the people that are following us, right? So, and then we just end up putting them all together, and you turn it into a sequence with a theme that then will go across a certain sequence. And that just brings someone's brand new into your world. And at the end of that sequence, they should know about you, personally, the products you have, what you do in the world, the value that you provide, and how you can help them. For you guys, storytellers, and you're writing books. So, I mean, there's loads of ideas that you guys could do with talking about certain characters in books, and you can get pretty creative with bringing somebody new into your world, that at the end of that sequence they have a good idea of if that you're a writer that they want to follow and read all your stuff.
All right, so just a framing thing, because I think this is important both for the success of trying to pull off a really good author sequence, but also just it's a mindset thing. I think a lot of authors have kind of a crippling belief before they even get going. Nobody really wants to hear from me, and I don't have anything to say. And as soon as you have those things in your head, I actually wish Dave was here right now, because we constantly bust on him about this, and it's been a decade now. Like, he still thinks that his readers don't want to hear from him. And I feel like as long as you're approaching the keyboard with that in mind, it's hard to write a good email that people will care about. Now, Dave's list, they actually do anyway. They still respond to him, you know, even though he's bringing that. But if he instead brought the knowledge that they like his books, which is why they're on his list, they have things in common because they like the same styles of stories. And if he's bonding with them and telling them, you know, what his interests are, or, you know, what's going on in his life creatively or not, whatever it is that gets him juiced up, the fact that he believes in his value is going to make the, believes in his value and puts the reader first. Those are two things that are going to justify the promise of that email. But until he can get in that right headspace, I think email marketing is too hard. So how do you feel about just that basic baseline belief? Either one of you, both of you.
Should you go first, Andre?
Yeah, I'll go first. Sometimes when I'm stuck about writing something, so we're writing a lesson for a course or something that seems intimidating, I always go back to my email writer. So I use Ulysses. It's just a big blank page that uses Markdown. So there's no messing about with fonts and stuff. And I'll write that lesson as if I'm writing an email. So because for me, it's just the barrier to entry to write an email. You know, emails are written to friends, so it's an audience of one. You're writing an email to a friend, so I just find it really easy to do it that way. And then, you know, when you're being real and you have insecurities, people respond to that. And because we've all got insecurities, whether we've externalized them or not. And, you know, Dave has a few. So if he mentions some of those on those earlier sequences or emails that he writes, even in the PS, like he just drops them inside there, people pick up on them. I mean, it's weird. Shawn and I write some really long emails. So, and we've recently we wrote this 5-part sequence that went out on our weekly newsletter. So it was over 5 weeks, and we put so much thought into these 5 emails that people really enjoyed. But in the PSs, we were just throwing in personal stuff. Like I'm building this racing rig, so I'll take a picture of the racing rig and I'll stick it inside there, and then Shawn will mention something, and it's only like just a few sentences. The emails that we get back is not about all the amazing content that we've written. It's about the like weird things that we've stuck in the PS. So people really bond with just like weird.
Well, because the PS says you are human. They were responding to the human part of you, which is exactly the point.
And email is a perfect medium to humanize things. You know, it's emails are between friends, right? And you know, so
how do you train yourself to have that belief? Because Dave knows that. I mean, and a lot of authors listening to this know that. We've talked about that. They know if you just pretend to write it for a friend, be vulnerable. But how do you go from knowing that to actually believing it enough to change your behavior?
Well, I think I can only speak from our perspective. Shawn might have a different view on this, but for me, you know, I don't really get embarrassed if I make spellings, or if I construct a sentence and I'm using the wrong words. It's the wrong there, for example. I don't that doesn't really hold me back from writing the best version of an email I possibly can in that moment. And I know writers are, you know, you guys feel self-confident sometimes as, am I going to be able to write this amazing thing? And there's that perfection thing that I think can come in. So maybe you put that same scrutiny into writing emails. I think that's part of it. And then obviously selling. You guys hate selling stuff. I mean, you guys as writers in general, your audience in general, which seems weird because, you know, you create your art for an audience. You don't create it for yourself, really.
Well, we love our ideas, right? We love selling our ideas, but I think that that's a little bit historical. You know, it's like inherited trauma. Forever, artists have been able to, I don't know, you had to get somebody else to sell your art. Artists were, whether you make movies or music or books or whatever it is, somebody else was ultimately in charge of selling that. But there's been this democratization of it, and now we all can create and sell our art. And for people like, I mean, like Neve's like, yes, I'm so excited to sell my own art. But
I'm also a huge introvert. I also have suffered from all of those same feelings. You know, like one thing, I do a lot of video, and people you guys asked me that. You're like, you're this huge introvert. I like started crying the first time I met them, because I was in a room of people and I was just jet lagged and like feeling weird. But they're like, so how do you do video every day? I was like, okay, you're just talking to yourself, you know? So I would always record videos as though I was just talking sort of to myself. And I would always say, I don't have to put it up. And then later on, I'd be like, well, I can just put it up and not watch it. I know sort of what I said. And then with writing, like with marketing writing, I would get to know individual people who were sort of like the audience, and then say, okay, well, I'm writing this letter for Jen, you know, I'm writing this email for my friend Jen, and I know she likes the same kind of TV I like, so I know she'd love to hear about that. And then, you know, I'm sure she'd like to hear about this cool thing I found over here. And I think sometimes as well, just getting super specific and like almost psyching your brain out. You're not, you're not sending something to an audience. That can really help. And then later on, if you separate out the actual sending from the process of creating, I think that makes a big difference.
Yeah, J. Abraham has a philosophy called the strategy of preeminence, and one of the components of that is you doing your audience a disservice if you don't sell them this thing in the right quantity, in the right amount, and you know, and then it goes on. And if you don't do that, you're doing them a disservice, because then they're not consuming, or at least getting the opportunity to read a book that you think that they're going to like. So that's one of the things that I think about all the time.
And if you keep thinking that you're, quote, writing an email, then that's always going to be a problem, right? You're writing, right? You're not writing an email. You're not writing it. You're not marketing. You're writing. And if you're a writer, just sit down at the keyboard and write. It's not rocket science, right? Like it seems like it's so convoluted and hard, and like, oh, I've got to learn, what to write. No, you don't. Sit down and write. Right? And if it sucks, it sucks. I mean, how many of us have written something that sucks and you trash it, right? Just write something else, right? It's this idea, it's trite, but if you want to be interesting, be interested, right? I write about stuff I'm interested in. I don't have any need to make you convinced I know anything about it other than what I'm sort of working out. I'm probably the most selfish writer in the world, because I'm really not writing for anybody else. I'm writing for me.
No, it's Johnny. I swear it's Johnny.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing when I sit down and write. I'm trying to figure shit out, and I hope that in that process somebody looks and there's some value created from it. But the moment, and I've seen this happen certainly from the agency side of my business thousands of times, that really good writers get completely paralyzed because they're trying to write, fill in the blank, a sales letter, a landing page, an email sequence. It's like, I don't know what to do. I'm like, well, you know how to write. Okay. Then you're 99% of the way there, right? Then just figure out the other 1% when you go. So if you're an author and you have a list of people who have raised their hand and said, I really like what you write, how absolutely batshit crazy is it to be paralyzed with an audience that said, I like what you write, could you write more? Right? It makes no sense. But the moment you're like, well, I don't know how to write emails, I bet you do. I bet you've written a few. Right? Just sit down and try writing one.
Yeah, I would argue rather strongly that in this context, the average author is actually way more well equipped to write an email to their audience than the average marketer or guru or whatever, because the author list, that person has specifically signed up to hear this person's perspective or voice or storytelling, whatever it is. And if they could just distill, hey, here's what people like about my work, I'm going to do that in 300 words instead of 80,000. And I'm going to do it every week. Like, that is kind of a formula for success that will scale, that will grow over time.
So guys, this is, since this is state of the industry, I do have a very specific question I wanted to ask. And this is, because I am the most selfish writer, so I want to know for me. I really enjoy email as a mode for communicating with my readers, more so than I used to. So it's actually become a little bit of a joke that Johnny doesn't want to interact. Well, no, I actually do now. It's a new thing, but there's, we've talked a little bit about ideas have been kicked around. This is sort of a separate discussion, but about like, well, should we be blogging and putting the longer treatise sort of discussions on a more permanent form? I'm really comfortable just sending those out in email. And what I'm sort of wondering is, what are people still engaging with, like, emails? Since you guys started, email has multiplied thousandfold. Like, everybody's getting a bunch of stuff. And I'm just wondering, sort of in a global level, if we can talk a little bit about how much are people still paying attention. And I'm sort of wondering how much of my effort just goes off into the ether, because I've gotten really good responses from people, and people are saying things that feel really good. Like, wow, they're on the spectrum of, well, I can tell you actually care. And thank you for doing this, that sort of thing. But it is a minority. And when you have a list with a whole bunch of people, you get a handful back. I just always wonder, how effective is email for that sort of thing anymore versus something more permanent like a blog, which people don't really go too much anymore?
Well, there's two components. I think in 20 years time, we'll still be using email. Unlike platforms that are run by corporations and driven by revenue, there is no owner of email. Email is part of the fabric of the internet. It's part of the protocols, TCP/IP and UDP. It's the stuff that transports all the stuff, and email is actually part of that. Nobody owns it. Nobody can stop it from operating, which is why even nation states can't control or email other than just block. So it's going to be around for a long while, I think. And I don't think, these platforms that are built as attention machines, all they want to do is pull people's attention and then sell that attention to the highest bidder. That's only going to get worse. So I think, yes, that's an opportunity to put your ads on, because there's always going to be eyeballs being pulled to those mediums. But just like your readers buy a book that's 80,000 words and they're going to read that, well, email is essentially long form that requires concentration and attention, and not everybody wants their attention raped when they go to Facebook, for example. So they appreciate and value email, and I don't think that's going to change for a long while. Yes, there'll be nuances, and my open rates will go down. Big deal. So just write a better sequence maybe, but yeah. And also one of the things that we've started to do, because you mentioned, well, do I write these long emails or should I write a blog post? One of the things that Shawn and I have been doing is we'll write our long emails, and then we'll take those emails or that sequence of emails and publish them as long form content, and then package that long form content up as a like a little sequencey thing, like a little course, like a thing that's then on the website. So it's not on the blog per se, but it is on the site as all this content that they can read, all the different emails. And they're exactly the same as the email. It's just we're using email as a way to go out initially, communicate with our audience. We have conversations with them. There's feedback loops. They respond. We learn from that feedback. It then informs our next emails that we write. So we're always using the feedback of that dynamic that comes from email, and to inform the next emails in the sequence. And then once that's all said and done, we then package that up and we can put that on the website for evergreen, so people can be exposed to that over time. And then they're going to want to come into our world, because every single long form blog post now, which is an email, has a link back to how they can get onto our email list, for example. So our what I call our outer world, our external world, is always getting bigger and bigger, and it's creating these opportunities for people to see our work and what we're writing. And without any, there's no opt-ins, there's no pressure for them to jump through a hoop before they get something. Everything's out there for them to read and consume, and in their own time, when they feel compelled and pulled towards us, then they'll find their way to a proper opt-in, or a funnel, whatever, and then they come onto our email list. But now that whole dynamic, their stance and their attention is completely different, because they haven't been baited or gamed or to be on the list. They've been there because they've seen something that's flicked a switch in there, and then they come on. So then so I think that's the evergreen loop. So email is a core component of that.
Well, this is a total leading question, but are you finding that you're able to cut through the clutter and get people to still pay attention to email despite the overwhelm? And I mean specifically your emails, obviously. We can only control what we can control. I don't really look at open rates. I don't look at clicks. As I log into ConvertKit, it's there, so I can't avoid it. But it's not something that I stress out about, because we can only most of the things that we do is be very respectful. So we'll say something over email. So it could be one email or it could be 3 emails, so multiple emails, and it'll unpack a certain idea or concept or whatever. And then we give people the opportunity to click a link to opt in. Even though they're on the email list, we want them to explicitly raise their hand and say, yes, I want to hear about this other thing that you're going to talk about, this promotion or this series or whatever. So when that happens, you now have their attention, because maybe your email list is 20,000 people big, and 2,000 people or 1,500 people click that link and raise their hand. Well, now you have the attention of those people, and now your open rate has gone from 30% to 80%, because now you're only sending those broadcast emails to that little segment of 1,500 people that want to hear about a certain thing. So when you go into my email account and you look at most of our broadcasts, our open rates are, they're not far off the 70s and 80s on average, but that's because most of those don't go out to the entire list. They go out to segments of the list. And whenever we send to the big list, then we're very respectful. We'll queue something up, let them know about it, and then ask them to raise their hand.
Yeah, and that's really something to draw attention to here. This is not at all how anybody does it, and it's the magic sauce in many ways, and it's counterintuitive. But think about the difference. If let's say you have a list of 20,000 people, and you send a 15-part email series over 3 weeks to 20,000 people, 18,000 of whom at that point in time have no interest in hearing it. Well, you've just pissed them off. They're not reading it. And when you go look at your stats, they look abysmal. You're like, oh my God, my open rate is whatever percent. Everything it's demoralizing. You can't act on the data because the numbers are small. Like, everything doesn't work, and you feel bad. It's like the winning soup of nasty, where everything is wrong. Or the way that we've been doing it is maybe you write a 3-part series, and the 3-part series says, here are some ideas that we're going to talk about at greater length in this upcoming series. If this isn't for you right now, you don't have to do anything. You're not going to be part of that. If it is for you right now, you have to very deliberately take an action, click on this link, you'll be added to that list, and you can unsubscribe at any time. So then your 20,000 list becomes like a 2,000 person list, but the energy of that 2,000 person list, infinitely different, because those people have actively said, I want to hear about this thing right now that you've told me about. I want to hear about it. So you get better feedback. Then your open rate's like 80, 90%. Your engagement is great. You feel good about it. Like, hey, look at me, I'm a hero. Like, everything changes because you've given your audience the opportunity to say, this isn't for me right now. And it's really, this is a central insight. This is from Dean Jackson. If your audience probably doesn't know who Dean Jackson is, but Dean Jackson is to marketing what Ray Charles was to piano playing and singing, right? That's Dean Jackson. So Dean Jackson has studied so many of his clients, of which there are many, and very high profile. And the observation he gleaned from the data is that customers who purchase over a 2-year period, 80% of them purchase after 90 days. And when you internalize what that means, it means that 80% of the economic opportunity in your audience is after 3 months. Like, that's when most people are going to buy, and not like a little most people. 80% are going to buy after 90 days. So when you understand that from a systems level, you re-engineer everything to recognize that marketing is a long game. Sure, there's the 20% you can grab with some persuasion tactics or whatever. But if you try to hammer that initial purchase too much, you do it at the expense of where all the opportunity is, which is days 91 through 700, whatever it is. So 730. So that insight really drives this. It's not really a tactic, but this idea of making smaller lists, because it's saying to the 18,000 people who aren't interested right now, that's perfectly okay. You shouldn't be paying attention. We shouldn't be bothering you, because later you will be interested. There'll be another 2,000 people a few months from now, and we'll talk to you then. And that makes everything better, and makes it better for the audience. And that's what matters.
That makes so much sense. I really love that, especially because, yeah, what you mostly hear from online marketers is you'll only get 3% of people to buy. And so, like, hammer, hammer, hammer. But playing that long game is something that I think authors are pretty skilled at, because, it takes a long time to write a book or a series of books. So one thought that I had just while you guys were talking about this is that for authors, this might look like creating a serial story over a period of time, and you can invite people to opt in specifically. Like, maybe if you wanted to do a sub story about some beloved characters, you could say, hey, if you want to hear more about this character, I'm going to do a serial. The other thing maybe that might work well for authors with this specific tactic would be alerts for a specific series. So, when you email about book 1, and then people reply or they buy, but then by the time you're on book 2 or 3, you're sort of like, oh, but don't forget you had to have gotten started over here on book 1. And often I find that those emails are the most awkward. So, just as I'm sitting here listening, I'm thinking, oh, that's so great. We could say to people, hey, do you want to be alerted when the following books in the sequence drop? And that way you're not emailing your whole list with a book 2 or a book 3. You can remind your list about the series as a whole, but have the really excited people getting that alert the second your book is available.
That's the central idea that's part of that's core to Autoresponder Madness. It's done on 2 fronts. So there's the automated way. So you're using autoresponders, and which are completely automated, and you control that narrative. And then within that, like you just mentioned, they can click a link. So it's no different to sending out broadcasts where you're saying similar things with a similar link, asking people to raise their hand. So that dynamic is the same no matter if you're sending just broadcast emails. So the sequence that Shawn and I sent out as newsletters, that was us writing in a moment. They knew it was going to go out on a Friday. We sent it out on a Friday. But then those can have those links, and that then people raise their hand, and then so can the automated ones. So, but as soon as you understand that, then you always know that whenever someone's raising their hand, your engagement just goes through the roof, because now you're just talking to this little segment of people. So your big list turns into hundreds of these little small segments. Some of them are only 10 big, some of them are 100 big, some of them are a few thousand. And so you're hardly ever communicating to that big, huge thing, certainly not most of the time.
Johnny, I want to jump back on a question you asked too about what's going to happen with email. And I think one of the dangers of email, and I've experienced this a lot lately, so it's what popped into my head when you asked the question. You need to know, you have to really understand why somebody opted in to be on your list and deliver that with some level of precision. And just that, like I'm on a couple of lists that really stand out for me. And I've, Andre and I talk a lot of different ideas. And one of the things I've talked about lately is like the hierarchies of like authority. Like you've got these people who come in and they read a book and then they like pull an idea of somebody's book and then they repeat it, right? They've added no value to the world. It's like, hey, I read this great book and you should know this part of it. And then there are people who do that with lots of books and they pull out 4 or 5 themes, or then there are people who curate ideas, or people who bring some level of expertise to, like, there's all these different levels. But what I've noticed, there are some emails that feel burdensome, even though they're good. And I think that's where the quicksand is. Like, I won't name anybody by name, but I get a couple of emails that the content in the email is really good, but oh my God, is it work, right? Like, it's like, hey, here's what I did last week. I read these 17 really great articles. And then there was this video that's incredible. And I wrote this other article. And then I went to this event and they've got this video series. It's incredible. And at the end, I look at the email and I'm like, I know, Joe, don't have enough time in my week to do what you did last week because you just sent me all of it, right? And I don't want to, like, but what it creates is this weird like existential angst where I'm like, that all looks really good, but it moves me away. I don't even want to open the emails when they come in. I'm like, oh no, this guy. And it's not because they're bad. Those are easy. The bad emails are easy to get rid of. So I think that the challenge for email is, if you are an author and you have an email list and you send out however you're doing your email communication, first of all, do you know why you're doing it? Like, what's the point? And do you know how somebody would describe it to somebody else? Like if you could listen to that conversation and somebody who's on your email list was recommending it to a friend, why would they recommend it, right? If you can't do that, then you need to be able to do that. That's the point. But make sure like that's what you're doing and that you're not creating like, you don't want people bracing when your email comes in. And Andre, we get some of this too, like every once in a while, and this is my favorite email we get too, but like we'll send out like a 1,500 word, very thoughtful email that we put a lot of heart and soul into. And there's always some asshat that writes back and says like, this could have been a lot shorter. Well, no shit, it could have been shorter, right? Of course it could have been shorter.
We have those
chose not to make
too.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, well, if, and I love how Andre handled these. He's just like, yeah, we're not the short email people, unsubscribe. Like, gone, like you're out. And it's, I'm not suggesting like that's always the answer, but it's.
It usually is.
It's like in Amadeus when he said too many notes.
Right. Yeah. So figure out who you are and be that person. Right? And be that person consistently. And maybe, if you're the 17 links in an email guy, okay, like there's nothing wrong with that. But I think far too many people who send emails are sending email because it's an end unto itself. Like, oh, I need to, this is part of the game. I need to do this. No, it's not. I've never been on Twitter in my entire life, like as a participant on Twitter. Like I've run a digital marketing agency for 21 years. I don't use Twitter. If you're like, how's that possible? I mean, it's a choice, right? Like that's not what I do. You don't have to do email marketing, right? If you choose to do it, then know why you're doing it. Not because it feels like a burden. It should light you up. You're right. Your audiences are writers. If you can't sit down on a blank screen as a writer and think, oh my God, I get a chance to write something else, then you probably don't want to do email marketing. Like it's not your thing. I don't know. It sounds overly simplistic.
It's not. It's perfect. I love that. And I'll do a little quick, of course, Dave story to illustrate the 17 links. That's pretty funny. And then I know we're kind of at time, so I'll wrap up my end and anybody else who has anything. But a couple of years ago, Dave and I had finished a series that had been kind of unfinished for a really long time. And we were finally sending the launch email that this third book in this trilogy was finally ready. And we were excited to send this email. And Dave was writing the email on launch. But, it goes back to the confidence. Does anybody really want to hear from me? And, Dave, just give them value. And so this is what he did for value here. It was the weekend after Super Bowl, and he did a roundup on all the commercials and all this stuff, and he had links to everything except our book. It got a mention, in the opening paragraph, and then he just not even in a PS, he just forgot about it, started talking about the Super Bowl and all of this value. But it's not aligned, because the value that his commentary on all of this different Super Bowl commercials, the value they wanted was, hey, I really love this story that you started 5 years ago. I'm glad you finished it. Thanks for letting me know. So I think to distill a lot of this conversation for any author working, I think there's kind of 3 things to focus on that everybody can focus on to do a better job with their emails. One is just the confidence. Just look, if they already bought your book and they opted into your newsletter or update or whatever you're calling it, it's because they have agreed that you are interesting to them and they want to hear what you have to say. So you need to have the confidence to fulfill that promise and continue to be interesting to them and say things that are relevant. Don't break your promise by wasting their time, telling them shit they don't want or telling them things they don't care about. Second thing is patience. Like it's patience. It's a relationship. It's not selling people in emails. It's checking in with them, repeating it, and not worrying about the people who say, wow, this is a long email. Johnny writes really long emails, but the people who like it, they love it. They bond with that. And the people who don't, that's okay. You probably won't like our books because they're long too. It's just reinforcing that. And then the next thing is it's related to confidence, but it's a little bit different. The first, confidence, I think, is a feeling of worthiness. I have the right to write this email because somebody wants to hear from it. But the other half is confidence that your way is okay. It's the blend of confidence and patience, that my way is okay. I don't have to worry about how everybody else is doing or what everybody else is doing or the way their emails run or what they're communicating, because, if 20,000 people on my list, if 18,000 don't want to hear, I only need to be able to talk to these people right now, and that over time, that's okay. I don't have to be worried about the person with 100,000 on their list who's, charting every time they release. They have a different game, a different way up the mountain, and I'm not really sure. So like those 3 things, those elements, it seems like no matter where you are in your email marketing, if you kind of apply those tenets, you'll get somewhere.
There's also something that it's a concept that Shawn and I learned from Jim Collins. It's this concept of bullets staying cannonballs. And email, it almost feels that email was purpose built for this concept. So the whole idea is you send bullets, which is just unfinished ideas. These it could be story ideas that for your next book. It's just unfinished ideas that you're expressing in the written form, just so you can think through it, and then you email that to your audience as just like a thought experiment. And it's unique in the sense that you can't really do this on the web, because the web's not really for unfinished pieces of content. But sending out to your email list, and it's so it doesn't have to be these perfect things. And we always tell people, this is an idea that we've had. What do you think about it? And they really love getting these bullets. And then based on the bullets, the feedback, if it hits home, if there's resonance, then we will create a cannonball, which is the big version, right? The big version, now that we know that's going to work. So one of the ideas that, because I'm one of the other thought experiments that I like to run, just think about things is, as an author, how could you do a similar concept? So my story coach had me writing fiction, wasn't long ago, and I'm a type of writer that has to write to reveal the story in my own head. I find it very difficult to plot and plan like you guys do into so much detail. So I started to just do journaling. So I was journaling a story just to unpack some of it. And then it'll start to reveal itself on the page. And then I can take whatever I've learned and then work on the proper story. So there was this like weird sequence. And I thought, actually, that unpacking of that initial rough story is perfect for these emails, for like an email sequence where you can expose an audience to this kind of story idea with this weird character, and and then you can write it and send it out, and you can get this feedback. And those are going to be imperfect emails and imperfect ideas, but it's going to inform other decisions you make based on that. So email doesn't need to be this medium where you're sending out these perfectly written things. It's perfect for imperfect things and ideas and thoughts.
All right. Well, this is obviously an endless topic. We'll close the door on that note. So thank you guys for coming on. Autoresponder Madness is at autorespondermadness.net if anyone's curious about that. Where else? Tiny Little Businesses? Where else should we find out about you guys?
Yeah, Tiny Little Businesses has got everything on there. Unfortunately, currently this year we've closed everything, so nobody can buy anything. So there's nothing to buy. So which is reassuring for people browsing the website that there's nothing to buy.
There you go.
But yeah,
a couple of marketers talking about how you can go to their site, but there's nothing to buy. You just get free information.
Yes, but doesn't that perfectly illustrate the whole point?
So awesome.
It's like it's patient. It's like confidence that you stick around long enough, your value is enough to get them in without like, hurry, they're on the front porch, hit her over the head and kiss her. Like, come on, dude. So yeah, this has been wonderful.
Well, in fact, there's a whole email course, and there's a paid traffic course, and there's a conversion course that's all on the site for free, and there's not even an opt-in. You just go read it.
That's so rad.
You have to work.
You guys are the best
to opt in. Really hard to opt in.
Yeah,
but it's funny. We'll leave you guys with one thing that's counterintuitive, but try this yourselves. Like this year, because we're doing open close enrollment. Anyone in marketing will tell you that the 2 days of an open and close enrollment where you get most of your customers are day one and the last day, and the last day is usually the big day, and the last day is when you bring out the big guns and you pile on the bonuses and you move everybody.
Last chance email,
right? Last chance. In the last two promos we've done, and this really speaks to how crazy Andre and I are, and similarly crazy, because I raised this as an idea back in April, and it's crazy. And he was like, yeah, let's do that. So that shows you how similarly crazy. But our close enrollment emails, what we've done the last two times is that we've created an entire like 8 to 12 week curriculum of marketing resources for free. And we put them in the email, and we do that to say, listen, some of you shouldn't buy right now. And knowing that, you're going to feel compelled to buy, though, because there's a certain energy around a promotion, and you're going to want to jump in.
Oh my God, I love this.
But instead of buying something when you shouldn't, here's, like, if it's an 8-week course, whatever, here's a free equivalent course on, and it's all pure marketing gold. Like, we put tens of hours, heart and soul into this. Like, go do this instead, and we'll see you next time. And it sounds like it violates every rule of marketing except
oh my God,
optimizing for happy customers.
Yeah.
It creates so much goodwill. So that's and it's fun, and it's good. It's just good human being stuff, right? You feel good when you do it. So yeah, invent your own version of that one. It's a lot of fun. There's a lot of joy in that. We tend to optimize for joy, so try that too.
Yeah, a simple way authors could do that is, hey, if you're having a hard time and you don't have $5 for a new book, here's a short story I wrote you just because. That's a way you could totally do that. It's the same thing. That's great.
So ending on optimizing for joy. Thanks again, guys, for being on. And this is the Story Studio podcast, State of the Industry. Stay tuned for more. Thanks everyone for listening. Bye-bye.
Adios.
There's the audio.